My name is Sophia, otherwise known as Princess Rosie Wonder Muffin, and this is Joey.
Hey everyone, I'm Joey. I'm the creative director and game design lead of Toontown Rewritten, also known as Sir Max.
And today we will be talking about the Toontown Improvement Project.
So I know some of you may be wondering, you came to this stream for the feedback system, not the Toontown Improvement Project. Rest assured, those are one and the same. It's possible that no one on the team calls it the Toontown Improvement Project except for me, but this is actually in reference to something that Disney used to do, also similarly named the Toontown Improvement Project. And so the idea was it's all about collecting feedback from the players. This screenshot is one of the few occasions that Disney mentioned Cognation directly and was gathering feedback from players about what they might want that expansion to look like. And so we call it TIPS, TIP, Toontown Improvement Project. And this is our way of making sure that we are collecting feedback from the community and logging it as best we can. So why are we having this workshop? Why is feedback important? Why would we make a whole event out of it? Well, feedback is one of the most important things for Toontown Rewritten. We really believe that it is important that we're listening to the community because we're community members as well, and we want this game to be the best it can be. And we have lots of awesome ideas about how to do that, but we know that you guys do too. And so it's really important to us that we're not only listening to your feedback, but that we have a system for making sure that your feedback is actually addressed. And we're doing this panel today to tell you guys about how we actually do that, and also to encourage you to make sure you know that your feedback really is seen and reviewed by the team. And it really does help us make Toontown better. Sophia, are you with us?
So we have a lot of different sources of where feedback comes from. So prior to the... Oh, yep, I'm here.
Sorry, I think we're just experiencing a little bit of delay. But we can hear you. You're good. You're just a few seconds behind.
Okay. All right. So we receive feedback from a lot of different sources. So prior to the introduction of the hub server, Toons would send feedback in via support@toontownrewritten.com. And additionally, Toons would write posts on fan sites like the Toontown fan site on MMO Central. In-game, Toons will approach different staff members like myself with ideas of possible changes or improvements. Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit have also been outlets for feedback. And our new Discord hub server, found at toon.town/discord, has a channel specifically for feedback as well as a channel for bug reports. So since the team is also comprised of individuals who play Toontown regularly, we have discussions pertaining to changes we would personally like to see made.
And really what this demonstrates here is that we get feedback from literally everywhere. We cannot go in game without getting suggestions from people, which is great. We love these suggestions and we get them all over the place. The problem is, how do we keep track of it all? Because there's so much. In fact, since 2013, we've received over 2,955 feedback emails alone. And if you think that number is crazy, since June 2020, just a few months ago, Toontown Rewritten has received 1,946 Discord feedback messages in our hub server. And so we are getting an exponential amount of feedback. And now the question is, what on earth do we do with it all? We have so much that it's overwhelming to go through, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that all of this feedback is equally important. Every player's voice matters. And I'll be honest, for a long time, for a couple of years, a lot of times our feedback emails and support nothing really happened with them because we didn't know what to do with it. We had never received so much feedback before on any of the past projects we had worked on. And there really wasn't like a guide we could look up online about, how do you manage feedback for thousands of people with all varying opinions and everything. And so starting last year at my internship with Shell Games, I worked on a game called Until You Fall. And Until You Fall was entering its alpha stage. And one of my jobs at my internship was to sort of manage the overall feedback system. And they were experiencing similar problems where they had hundreds of people giving them lots of feedback. It wasn't quite as much as Toontown, but still an overwhelming amount. And they wanted to make sure that we were keeping track of that feedback accurately. So I started developing a system with a little bit of silly science here. And what you can see on screen now is the flowchart that we use at Toontown Rewritten to track feedback over time. Because we didn't want feedback to just sort of get thrown in a trash bin and we would try our best to keep things in mind, but it was really difficult to track feedback over time. And it was difficult to know how many people had suggested a certain piece of feedback. And so we came up with this flowchart. And now we have a system that has feedback in 3 stages. So the first stage is raw feedback. That means just somewhere, someone, something has been said about Toontown. It could even be in this chat right now as you guys are watching the video. If you have any feedback for Toontown, if you send it out into the open, that becomes raw feedback for us. And so when we receive raw feedback, our community representatives, such as Sofia, take it and log it as summarized feedback. So summarized feedback is taking a longer feedback suggestion. Let's say, for example, a Toontown player has a lot of detailed ideas about the ways they would improve Goofy Speedway. But what we really want to know in terms of the heart of the issue is that we have someone who is unhappy with Goofy Speedway and wants to improve, let's say, the racing controls. And so Sofia would take that suggestion, the very long suggestion about all the things that could be done with Goofy Speedway, and boil it down into a summary, which might be players want improved racing controls. And then in the description of that feedback card, where the feedback is summarized, we'll put the full message so that we can kind of look in more depth if we decide to pursue that piece of feedback. So once feedback has been summarized, it gets a popularity value. This is the number of people who have said this feedback. So if we get that in the future, we'll bump up the popularity value. If it comes in on the hub server, we even have a built-in way where people can +1 messages, and that also allows us to get the popularity of that particular suggestion. And then from there, it gets marked as needs review. And so once feedback is in our system as a summary, then our game design department will go through and process it. Processing feedback essentially means assigning labels to it and making sure that it fits our standards for Toontown Rewritten. Is it feedback that we actually want to address? And if so, how do we address it? Which departments of our team would be the people to address it? And what sort of labels could we apply to it? Is it controversial? Is it small and meaningful? Do we want to put a spotlight on it because maybe it's not the most popular, but it would be a really good suggestion? Those are all the things that we consider when going through that stage. And so on this screen here, you can see an example of our feedback tracker. We use a system called Notion, which is a really great platform. It's similar to Trello, if anyone's used that before. And this is where all of our feedback gets stored. We have so much feedback. You can even see with all these different categories, we have game feedback, services feedback, moderation feedback, community feedback. And this screenshot isn't even fully up to date. As of this screenshot, we have 564 pieces of game feedback. And it's really far more than that now that we've launched our hub server. So now we're going to show you an example of what it looks like for a piece of feedback to go from the raw feedback, a message sent in a chat, all the way to processed.
Here's an example of some raw feedback from Discord. So Lappy, our public relations coordinator, created a bot that pulls these messages into an internal spreadsheet with all the feedback that we received. So here we have a suggestion. It's a great suggestion from Kat regarding a favorites feature for wardrobe and accessory items. So they address their experience with the outfit choosing process and a resolution to the issues that they encounter. And then if you can see at the bottom of the raw Discord message, there's an option for other tunes to give it a +1 if they're in support of the suggestion and if they would like to see it implemented. So here is the summarized feedback. So we make it ready for review by using Notion, which is a workspace tool that we use to organize feedback and various other things. So as you can see, we begin by grouping it into a category. Then we add tags. So for instance, this is regarding clothing. And then we update the popularity. So how many +1s it got. And then we label it as needs review by game design. And then lastly, you can see the word by word suggestion made by Kat. It's at the bottom. And also there is an opportunity to add attachments. So if tunes submit feedback with a screenshot, we can also include this in the summarized card so we have a better idea of what your feedback is about. We do receive multiple suggestions, likes, or dislikes that are similar in nature. So we don't make an additional Notion card, but rather we add on each suggestion to one card. So if someone wanted to add on to Kat's feedback about clothing, we would add their suggestion in the comments.
And so once the community representatives have gone through and summarized that feedback, then it's up to the game design department to process it. So you can see for this particular piece of feedback, we went through, it was assigned the design approved label because adding the ability to favorite outfits sounds really awesome. It definitely meets our standards for Toontown Rewritten. It sounds like something we want to do. So the design department approved it. Then it was assigned to the programming and design departments because to make this particular piece of feedback happen, programming needs to do a little bit of work to put it into the game. We also might need a little bit of design work to just figure out what that interface actually looks like, where the buttons are going to go, all that sort of stuff. Now, when we're deciding what feedback we're going to address, it's not just up to one person's personal opinion. We actually came up with a set of standards in the game design department that we call design pillars. And these are the pillars that we believe makes Toontown what it is. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what are sort of 3 key phrases that we could boil down as sort of the general theme and feeling of Toontown, what we wanted it to feel like. And we use these pillars not just for feedback, but really everything, all of the projects that we work on, anything that we pursue on the team, we want to make sure that it lives up to these standards. Because if it does, then we believe that it's upholding, what makes this game really great. Now, I'm not going to go into each of these individually, but you're welcome to read them. You're also welcome to ask questions about them. These are things that we're still working on developing. So as we sort of, like every day, it feels like we're kind of uncovering new things about Toontown that we didn't know before. And so as we sort of learn more, get more of the feeling of Toontown, hear more from the community, we certainly can adjust these pillars to better suit what we believe is the vision for the game that we all want.
Yeah, so in order to give us some good feedback, what we're looking for is pretty succinct to the point. It allows us to have a general idea of what your feedback is about. We want to know why you like or dislike something. So by being descriptive, it allows us to envision any changes or improvements that you would like to see made. And then by breaking it down into a like, a dislike, or a suggestion, it can be processed into a Notion card, and the next steps can be determined if that is something we could implement or not. Receiving good feedback is super, super important because we get a lot of it, as Joey mentioned before, and it can be pretty challenging to organize if we don't have kind of a format to the ways that we receive the feedback.
And so as we sort of start to wrap up here, this is a very short panel, but we wanted to emphasize, again, how important feedback is for making Toontown better. I mean, if you look at this screen, you can see some of the things that have changed as a result of feedback from the community. We ended up upscaling the Toontown map. We ended up adding records to the fishing page. We turned our Tooncast from what it was back in January, which was sort of a 2-hour long, sort of informal chat with Toontown developers, into a more Nintendo Direct style presentation. And even a lot of our 2.7.0 changes that we announced at Behind the Tooniverse, such as the ambient sound effects option, those came from community suggestions. So we really are listening. We really do want your feedback. The best way to send it is either through support@toontownwritten.com or toon.town/discord. However, even outside of that, even in this chat, even on any social media pages, we're always looking for feedback. We want to make sure that no matter where you send it, whether it be in game, whether it be to us directly, that in some way we're keeping track of it, because it really helps us make this game better. We care deeply about it. This is one of those things that, like, at face value, you know, when you guys are sending feedback, you probably aren't thinking about, wow, my message is going to travel from like through this whole process before it gets addressed. But it's one of those things that we really care about a lot on Toontown Written, to make sure that we are like making the game that the community wants to see. It takes a lot of work, you know. Doing this whole feedback system isn't easy. It takes a lot of people to manage it, but we do believe it really helps us make the game better and helps us know what you guys as the community want for it. And so that is the end of our presentation. Like I said, it was a very short one. However, we do have a few minutes if anyone has any questions or even tips that they want to share with us. So feel free to put those in the chat. Let's see. Just going to wait for the stream to catch up, see if any questions come in. Okay, I see a really great question from Nightly Cafe. They ask on Twitch, has there ever been any consideration in making a public board so that people can see which tweaks are in progress? And actually, yes, we have actually built our feedback system in a way that one day, hopefully, we can turn it into a public board. We're not really quite ready for that yet. We still have some tweaking to do, and like we need to figure out how exactly to make that look good and everything. But currently, all of the feedback is logged in such a way that we mark when we complete it. We upload screenshots and everything, so that one day, hopefully, we can open up that board so that you can see all of the feedback that is in progress being addressed, that has been addressed in the past, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's a really great idea. We definitely want to do that at some point. I see some people talking about they love the Toontown Direct format. I love it too. Big shout out to Pablo for putting all that together. They're really awesome and fun to make, though they do take a lot of work. Over on YouTube, someone asks, will there ever be a discussion channel for current feedback? Since sometimes there can be flaws in other people's suggestions, and also I'm sure a lot of people just want to talk about it. So the reason that we haven't had any discussion channels on our Toontown Written Hub server is that we want to make sure that there are other community avenues that we're not pulling away from. You know, there's a lot of really great Discord servers that have chat channels and everything, and we want to support those communities rather than pull away from them. However, that said, it's also a moderation thing. You know, it's a lot of work to keep those channels moderated, and so by having the feedback channel, have slow mode on as it does, it allows us to still get that feedback, still get a tiny bit of discussion without having to have full-time moderators. But that said, we know that it's something that people really want. It's actually one of our most popular community suggestions. So we'll definitely consider it, and I would definitely recommend continuing to send in that feedback if it's something you want to see. Over on YouTube, someone sent us a tip to say that we should make an announcement and bulletin board on Discord for new feedback or bug fixes when they're being added. I think that's a great idea. Let's see. Let's see if there's any questions we can get Sophia to answer. Sophia, have you seen any questions in the chat that you want to address?
Yeah, I see. So, yeah, so on Twitch, I noticed somebody mentioned something about doing a species rewrite. And so we have received feedback for that before, and that's something that we have considered doing, but for a couple of different reasons, that is actually something we're not planning on implementing at this time. And Joey can go into a little more detail about why. But yeah, just we're kind of putting that on hold for now, and we may consider it again in the future, but for now, we're not focusing too much on that.
Yeah. And sorry, I was just reading another question, but that was about the species rewrites.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's one of those things that's really tough from a design perspective, because that is actually one of our most popular suggestions, is that people really want to rewrite their toon species. And so as the design department, we have to make a decision about, is that something that feels like it meets our design pillars? Is it something that is going to inadvertently take something away from Toontown, something intangible about the design that is kind of hard to track? Because the reason that we originally didn't add species rewrites, the reason you can only change your toon's color and height and everything and name, is because we didn't want your toon to feel different than like a different character entirely. We still wanted it to be that same person essentially that you created. Just like people in real life, they can change their name and everything, but there's something about a toon species that just feels like it's sort of core to that character, and that by rewriting your species, you're essentially creating a brand new character entirely, which we would rather just create a new toon rather than do that. However, it is one of those things that still is widely suggested. It's something that is one of our more controversial bits of feedback that we discuss a lot. So again, if it's something you want to see, definitely still feel free to send it in, because even if we're not addressing something right now, it doesn't mean that we never will. The question I was looking at earlier, I've seen a couple of questions about removing the gender lock on toons, making it so that there's not really boy and girl toons, but there's just a toon that you can apply any sort of eyelashes or skirts or any of the like gendered lock things on there. And that is another suggestion we get a lot, and it's something we would love to do. It's actually something that we've already started some work on. The only reason it hasn't been addressed yet is it's really difficult, because the way that Toontown was built is that gender is like really so ingrained into the code that it's not entirely possible at the moment for boy toons to wear skirts. And in fact, some of you may have seen through glitches and whatnot that if you manage to get a boy toon to wear a skirt at the game, or even like girl shorts or anything, the texture will like break because they use completely different values in the toon DNA system. That said, a lot of work has been done on that feature. It's something that we are actively working to address. It just takes a lot of time to do it. But we completely agree that we want to remove any of the gender locks that exist in Toontown, since it's kind of just an artifact of how old this game is. Let's see. We've got a question that says, do you sometimes have to break down suggestions if they're too long? Like if it's a very long suggestion that in theory is many smaller ones? And yes, we absolutely have to do that a lot. A lot of times, I mean, as Sophia gave, a couple slides ago when talking about good feedback, it helps us a lot, especially on the hub server, if you just do sort of one piece of feedback per message, because that just makes it easier to digest. But we do get an awful lot of just very long, especially in email, we'll get huge paragraphs of just tons of changes that people want. And so we have to sort of go through and actually break those up into multiple feedback cards so that we are addressing all the individual pieces of feedback. This is a really great question. Someone asks, how do you decide which feedback to address first? Is it first?
Definitely. I think.
Oh, sorry, Sophia.
Sorry, my audio is lagging a little bit. Yeah, I definitely think it's important specifically to provide kind of like a solution or just sort of like various ideas on how to make the change, just because, saying something along the lines of like, oh, my doodle is following me around and I can't, water my organic throw trees, but not really providing like ideas behind things that could be changed or done differently, that makes it harder for us to kind of give you what you want and help you enjoy the game more.
Yeah, definitely. The other question I was looking at, so they asked how do you decide which feedback it gets addressed first, and that is a really great question because it's really hard to know. We don't base feedback just on popularity. That's actually part of the reason that we process feedback and assign labels to it, is that we want to make sure that even if a piece of feedback isn't the most popular, every single piece of feedback that gets sent in through email and Discord at least gets reviewed. And so the design team is able to put a spotlight label, that we call it, on sort of less popular pieces of feedback that would still be really good suggestions that we feel like are things that should be implemented into Toontown. However, when it comes to which of those things actually gets implemented, it's really up to the team. A lot of team members, some of them will go through our feedback tracker and just sort of search. We add labels based off of roles and departments. So if a programmer is looking for like, I've got a little bit of free time, what's some feedback I could address? They can just sort of scroll through the feedback tracker, and we've organized it in such a way that hopefully makes it really easy, digestible for them. Same for texture artists. Really, any position on the team can go and look and see which feedback they want to address. So a lot of times it comes down to either individual team members or team members collectively deciding that like this is something that we want to address, and we take a whole bunch of factors into account, whether it be the value of it, like how much work needs to go into it, and how much value is it going to bring to Toontown, or how popular it is, all that sort of stuff. So we've only got a few minutes left. We started a little late, so we're going to go a little over time. But just looking for maybe a few last questions we could address. And of course, if your questions don't get answered here, we do have our Q&A panel on Sunday where you can send them in as well. And you're also fully welcome to send me a message, be it on Twitter or Reddit is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And Sofia is also one of our community representatives on Discord, so you can probably contact her through the hub server. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, this is a really good question from Just a Blue Tune. So, and this may be a good one to end it on. They ask, do you intend to keep TTR as vanilla and close to Toontown Online as possible? I keep seeing people asking for things like new gags, new cogs, new departments, but they fail to realize you're trying to keep that TTO vibe. Can you confirm if that's the case? So that is a really good question, because it is a common misconception. A lot of people think that our goal as Toontown Rewritten is to be Toontown Online and nothing else. Our sort of motto since the beginning of Toontown Rewritten has always been that we want to pick up where Disney left off. And that doesn't mean keeping the game exactly as it was on September 19th, 2013 when it closed. What that means is we want to keep developing the game as if Disney never closed it. If the same developers were still creating Toontown today, what decisions would they make? And so if we feel like, a new gag is something that the original developers would have done if Toontown Online were able to keep going a few years later, then that's absolutely something we're going to do. We are working on big projects. A lot of you know the All About Field Offices project, which is going to add a lot of new battle mechanics and whatnot to Toontown. And so that's one of those things where, as we design that project, we're paying close attention. We've done a lot of research. We've done a lot of discussion with Toontown Online developers to sort of get the feeling of what this game was intended to be and why they made certain decisions they made. And that's how we informed our design pillars. Those pillars are the things that guide us to help us figure out, if this is something that feels right for Toontown Online. So we absolutely are going to keep adding new things. We're going to keep addressing your feedback. It is totally not out of the question that we would see a new cog or new gag or anything like that in the future. Really, those things just take a lot of time. And so we ultimately, just to sort of sum it up, it's not that we are trying to stay exactly the same as Toontown Online. We are just trying to create a game that feels like Toontown Online never closed. What sort of updates would the original developers create if they were still working on it today in 2020? And that's a lot of the ways that we address our feedback. So I think that's all the time that we have. I know there were a lot of other questions that we weren't able to get to, but I really do want to answer them. So please feel free to send those to me. And also feel free to send them in for our Q&A panel on Sunday. But Sofia, are there any other last words you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think, it's been a work in progress, and we have definitely improved in the ways that we process feedback and streamlined it a bit, but it's pretty exciting being able to see all of the things that people want to see done differently, or, cool things that we might want to add in the future. So thank you all for your time and for continuing to be a part of our very, very wonderful community.
Definitely. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for sending in your feedback. And we'll see you later we have a cast member panel happening later today. And we also have a very exciting Toontown Online developer reunion where we're going to have Bruce Woodside, Felipe Lara, Jesse Schell, Joe Shockett, and Sean Patton, all former Disney Imagineers, coming to talk about their work for Toontown Online. So that one is happening at 2 p.m. Toontown time, or 2 p.m. Pacific. So thank you all, and we'll see you later.